Let's just stop for a second. Let's just pause and appreciate the absolute, unadulterated absurdity of where we are right now. Because if you blink, you might miss the fact that the President of the United States is currently trying to gaslight the entire country into believing that medical science has been fundamentally rewritten to accommodate his ego. We have reached the point where we aren't even arguing about policy anymore. We aren't arguing about tax brackets or tariffs or foreign aid. We are arguing about whether a human being can undergo a massive, loud, claustrophobic medical procedure and have no idea which part of their own body was being examined. Let that sink in. Donald Trump, a man who has spent his entire life obsessing over his own image, his own body, and his own superior genes, wants you to believe two mutually exclusive things. First, that he went to Walter Reed for an MRI in October, a procedure that is not, by any definition, part of a routine physical, and that the results were perfect. And second, that despite receiving this perfect result, he has absolutely no clue what the doctors were actually looking at. He says, "It was just an MRI. I have no idea what part of the body." I need you to understand how insulting this lie is. This isn't just a lie. It is an insult to your intelligence. It is a slap in the face to anyone who has ever stepped foot in a hospital. An MRI isn't a blood pressure cuff. It isn't a thermometer under the tongue. You are strapped onto a table, you are slid into a magnetic tube that sounds like a construction site for 45 minutes. Technicians are placing coils around a specific body part. They are telling you, don't move your knee, or hold your breath for your chest, or keep your head still. You do not leave an MRI machine wondering if they scanned your left ankle or your prefrontal cortex. That doesn't happen. It is physically impossible.
But here's the kicker, and this is why top doctors are looking at this statement and screaming into the void. There is no such thing as a perfect MRI. That is not a medical term. That is a marketing slogan. Ask any radiologist, ask any neurologist, ask any general practitioner in this country. They do not write perfect on a chart. They write unremarkable. They write no acute findings. They write within normal limits. But perfect? Perfect is the language of a con man. Perfect is the language of a cult leader who needs his followers to believe he is superhuman. We saw it with the perfect phone call to Ukraine. We saw it with the perfect timeline on COVID. And now we have the perfect MRI. And the reason this matters, the reason we cannot just laugh this off as Trump being Trump, is because of what it implies. If he is lying about something as binary, as simple, and as verifiable as what part of his body was scanned, what else is hidden in that report? You don't get advanced imaging at Walter Reed in October just for fun. You don't do it because you enjoy the ambiance of a military hospital. You do it because there is a problem. And instead of transparency, instead of the basic honesty we should expect from a public servant, we get this pathetic, transparent, insulting fairy tale about a perfect test for a mystery body part. They think you are stupid. That is the only explanation. They think they can stand in front of a camera, say words that mean absolutely nothing, and that you will just nod along because the truth is too inconvenient for them to handle. Well, I'm sorry, but we are not nodding along. We are looking at the receipts. And what we are seeing is a medical impossibility wrapped in a political lie.
Let's look at the timeline, because this is where the entire narrative starts to crumble under the weight of its own incompetence. We are being told with a straight face by the press secretary, by the White House physicians, and by the president himself that this visit in October 2025 was part of a routine physical. That is a lie. And I don't use that word lightly. I am using it because we have the receipts. Donald Trump had his annual physical in April 2025. We all remember it. We saw the memos. We saw the reports. So are we now expected to believe that the definition of annual has changed? Are we operating on a different calendar system where a year lasts 6 months? Because unless the Earth has suddenly sped up its orbit around the sun, going to Walter Reed in October for a physical you already had in April is not routine. It is responsive. Routine means you go in when you feel fine to make sure you stay fine. Responsive means you go in because something hurts, something is failing, or something scared you. You do not wake up on a random Tuesday in October, 6 months after your last checkup, and say, you know what would be fun? Let's fire up the motorcade, shut down traffic in Bethesda, and go hang out inside a magnetic tube for an hour. And let's break down the term advanced imaging. This is the phrase Carolyn Levitt used. It sounds impressive, right? It sounds like something from Star Trek, but let's translate that from PR speak into actual English. Advanced imaging is a euphemism for we needed to see inside him because a stethoscope wasn't enough.
In the medical world, an MRI is a diagnostic tool of significant resource. It is used to confirm a suspicion. You use an X-ray to see a broken bone. You use an MRI to see soft tissue damage, tumors, strokes, torn ligaments, or degenerative neurological conditions. You do not use an MRI for a wellness check. There is not a single insurance company in this country, nor a single responsible medical board that recommends full-body MRIs for asymptomatic patients. It creates false positives. It is bad medicine. So Dr. Sean Barbabella and the White House medical team have two options here, and both of them are damning. Option A, they are practicing bad medicine by ordering expensive, time-consuming, complex tests on a president for absolutely no medical reason. Or option B, they had a reason, a specific reason, a reason that required looking deep into the tissue of a specific body part. And that brings us back to the most insane claim of all. I have no idea what part of the body. Let's foreclose on this nonsense right now. I want you to imagine the logistics of an MRI. This isn't a blood draw where you look away and feel a pinch. The setup for an MRI is specific to the anatomy. If they are scanning your brain, they put a cage over your face. You cannot move your head. You are staring at plastic grid lines inches from your nose. You know it's your brain. If they are scanning your shoulder, your arm is strapped to your side in a specific contour coil. You know it's your shoulder. If they are scanning your knee, your leg is immobilized in a brace while the rest of your body is relatively free. You know it's your knee.
To claim you don't know is to claim that you were unconscious. Is that what he's saying? Was he sedated? Because if he was sedated, that invokes the 25th Amendment questions. If he wasn't sedated, then he was awake, alert, and fully aware of which limb or organ was being targeted by a giant, thumping magnet. There is no middle ground here. You are either comatose or you are aware. So when he says, I have no idea, he is relying on the assumption that his supporters have never been sick, never been to a doctor, and never had a medical test in their lives. It is a level of contempt for the voter that is truly breathtaking. But wait, because the forensic evidence gets even clearer when you look at the psychological tell. Did you catch what he said immediately after claiming ignorance? He didn't just stop at, I don't know. He immediately pivoted. He said, it wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. This is what we call a non-denial denial that actually confirms the suspicion. Why bring up the brain? Nobody asked if it was the brain. The reporter asked, what part of the body? By specifically ruling out the brain unprompted, he is revealing exactly what he is worried about. It's the, I didn't steal the money defense before anyone notices the cash is missing. He is terrified of the narrative regarding his cognitive decline. We have seen the slurring. We have seen the freezing on stage. We have seen the mixing up of names, confusing Nikki Haley with Nancy Pelosi, confusing Biden with Obama. These aren't gaffes. These are symptoms. And the fact that his immediate reflex is to shout, it wasn't my brain, tells you exactly where his insecurities lie.
And let's talk about this cognitive test he claims to have aced. We need to be extremely clear about what the Montreal Cognitive Assessment actually is. He talks about it like it's the SATs. He talks about it like it's a Mensa entrance exam. It is a test designed to detect dementia. It asks you to draw a clock. It asks you to identify a lion. It asks you to repeat 5 words. If you ace this test, it does not mean you are a genius. It does not mean you are perfect. It means you are not currently clinically senile. That is the bar. The President of the United States is bragging that he cleared the bar of not currently clinically senile, and he is using that as a shield to explain why he was at a hospital in October for a secret scan he claims he doesn't remember. This is the forensic reality. We have a 79-year-old man. We have an unexplained, non-routine hospital visit 6 months after his physical. We have a press secretary using vague terminology to hide the specific diagnostic code. We have a patient claiming ignorance of his own body while simultaneously getting defensive about his brain. And we have the word perfect. I want to go back to that word because it is the smoking gun of the lie. In medicine, perfect doesn't exist. You know what exists? Age-appropriate degeneration, mild arthritis, benign cysts. If you scan any 79-year-old man on this planet, I don't care if he's an Olympic athlete, you are going to find things. You will find wear and tear. You will find a history of a life lived. To claim the results were perfect is to claim that Donald Trump is a biological anomaly. It is to claim that he is not human.
And that is the point. That is always the point with him. He cannot be human because humans are weak. Humans get sick. Humans need help. Humans have knees that give out and backs that ache and brains that slow down. He cannot admit to any of that. So instead of just saying, I have some sciatica or I tweaked my rotator cuff golfing, things that would make him relatable, things that would make him human, he has to construct this elaborate, fragile reality where he is a medical marvel who undergoes mysterious, perfect procedures for conditions he doesn't even know he has. But the cracks in the story are too wide. The dates don't line up. The medical protocols don't support it. And his own words, his own defensive, frantic need to rule out a brain issue give the game away. This wasn't a physical. This wasn't routine. And he knows exactly what they were looking for. The fact that he won't tell us, and the fact that he is lying so clumsily about it, should send a chill down the spine of every single American who believes that we have a right to know if the commander-in-chief is physically and mentally fit to do the job. They are hiding something. The question isn't if they are hiding it. The question is, how long do they think they can keep this up before the reality becomes too obvious to ignore? Here is the reality that the Republican Party doesn't want you to see. This is not a glitch. This is a feature. If you are looking at this MRI story in a vacuum, you are missing the forest for the trees. Because if there is one thing we have learned over the last decade of Donald Trump, it is that when it comes to his health, the truth is not just distorted, it is obliterated. We have seen this movie before. We know the plot, we know the characters, and we know exactly how the ending is written.
Let's rewind the tape. Because to understand why a president would lie about an MRI in 2025, you have to understand the absolute clown show of medical gaslighting that has defined his entire political existence. Does the date November 16th, 2019 ring a bell? It should. That was a Saturday. It was a beautiful autumn day in Washington, D.C., and suddenly, without warning, without a scheduled appointment, without notifying the press pool, the President of the United States was rushed to Walter Reed Medical Center. Do you remember the excuse they gave us then? Because it is eerily similar to the garbage they are feeding us now. The White House press secretary at the time, Stephanie Grisham, came out and told the American people that Donald Trump was simply getting a head start on his annual physical. She called it Phase 1 of his physical. Phase 1. I want you to find me a doctor, find me a single medical professional on this planet who splits a routine physical into phases separated by months. It doesn't happen. You don't go in November to get your blood pressure checked and then go back in April for the hernia check. That is not how medicine works. But they looked us in the eye and said, nothing to see here, just an overachiever getting his physical done early. And what did we find out later? We found out that he was potentially dealing with a cardiac event. We saw reports of him being unable to lift a glass of water with one hand a few months later at West Point. We saw the unsteady date on the ramp. The Phase 1 lie was a cover-up for a specific acute medical issue.
So when Caroline Leavitt comes out in 2025 and says this MRI was part of a routine physical 6 months after his actual physical, she is plagiarizing the 2019 playbook. They are recycling the same lies because they worked the first time. The media moved on. The base didn't care. And so they are doing it again. But the pattern goes deeper than just cover-ups. It goes to the very corruption of the institutions around him. Donald Trump doesn't just lie. He forces the people around him to debase themselves to support the lie. We cannot talk about this pattern without talking about Dr. Ronnie Jackson. This is the man who stood at the White House podium, a rear admiral in the United States Navy, and told the world that Donald Trump weighed 239 pounds. 239 pounds. Now, look, we don't need to body shame anyone, but we have eyes. We have spatial awareness. The reason that number matters is because 240 pounds would have put him in the obese category on the BMI scale. So, miraculously, the president weighed exactly 1 pound less than the threshold for obesity. It was a statistical miracle. But Dr. Jackson didn't stop there. This is the man who said, and I quote, "He has incredibly good genes, and it's just the way God made him." He said that if Trump had eaten a better diet, he might live to be 200 years old. Live to be 200 years old. This wasn't a medical report. This was North Korean state propaganda. This is the kind of thing you hear about Kim Jong-un, that he doesn't use the bathroom, that he learned to drive at age 3. It is the deification of the leader. And the terrifying part is that it worked. Ronnie Jackson degraded his rank, degraded his medical oath, and degraded the dignity of his office to soothe the ego of one man. And what did he get for it? He got a congressional seat. He got to be a MAGA celebrity.
The lesson was learned. Lie for Trump, and you will be rewarded. Tell the truth about his health, and you are finished. Remember Dr. Harold Bornstein, the eccentric doctor from New York with the long hair? He admitted that Trump dictated his own health letter. Trump literally wrote the letter that said he would be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. And when Bornstein told the truth about Trump taking Propecia for hair growth, Trump's bodyguards raided his office and seized his files. This is the pattern. It is aggressive, it is retaliatory, and it is total. And let's not forget the most dangerous instance of this pattern, COVID-19. We now know, thanks to former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, that Donald Trump tested positive for COVID-19 before his debate with Joe Biden in 2020. He knew he had the virus. He knew he was contagious. And what did he do? He got on a stage and screamed at Joe Biden for 90 minutes, spewing microdroplets into the air, putting the lives of everyone in that room at risk. He concealed a deadly diagnosis for political gain. When he was finally hospitalized, do you remember the spin? They told us his symptoms were mild. They told us he was working from the hospital. We saw those staged photos of him signing blank pieces of paper with a Sharpie to look busy. But the reality, his oxygen levels had plummeted. He was on the verge of being put on a ventilator. He was given experimental antibodies that weren't even available to the public. He was dying, and they told us he was strong. So when he says his MRI was perfect in 2025, you have to filter that through the lens of a man who hid a deadly virus, who lied about his oxygen levels, who dictated his own medical letters, and who forced a Navy admiral to claim he could live to be 200.
This is not a man who treats medical data as fact. He treats medical data as leverage. To Donald Trump, his body is not a biological organism. It is a brand asset. In his worldview, the worldview of the authoritarian strongman, illness is weakness, and weakness is death. If he admits to a knee problem, he's weak. If he admits to a mini-stroke, he's weak. If he admits that his brain is shrinking or his heart is stuttering, the illusion of the strongman shatters. He looks at Putin. He looks at Orban, the dictators he admires, and what does he see? He sees men who never get sick. He sees men who ride horses shirtless and play hockey and project invincibility. He is desperate to emulate that. And that desperation creates a national security risk. Because if the President of the United States is hiding a condition that affects his judgment, his mobility, or his cognitive function, we are flying blind. We are letting a man with his finger on the nuclear codes operate in a black box of his own making. The 200 years old lie was funny. The 239 pounds lie was a meme. But the perfect MRI lie, when the man is 79 years old, that isn't funny. That is dangerous.
The pattern tells us that he will never voluntarily release the truth. He didn't release his tax returns. He didn't release the visitor logs. He didn't release the records of his calls on January 6th, and he sure as hell isn't going to release an MRI that shows a lesion, a tumor, or an atrophy. He is banking on the fact that we have short memories. He is banking on the fact that the media will get distracted by the next tweet, the next scandal, the next outrage. He is betting that the sheer volume of his lies will crush our capacity to care about any single one of them.
But we have the receipts. We have the timeline. We know that phase 1 was a lie. We know that 239 pounds was a lie. We know that mild symptoms was a lie. So why on earth would anyone anywhere believe that it was just an MRI is the truth? And that brings us to the terrifying part, the part that keeps national security experts awake at night. Why does this matter? I know there are people watching this who are saying, Brian, it's just an MRI. Who cares? Everyone gets sick. If Donald Trump were a private citizen running a golf course in Bedminster, I would agree with you. He would have every right to keep his medical history locked in a vault. But he is not a private citizen. He is the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. He possesses the sole authority to launch a nuclear strike. He is the person who must process complex, high-stakes intelligence briefings at 3 a.m. when a crisis breaks out in the South China Sea. We are not asking for these records because we are curious. We are asking because we are flying blind. If the President of the United States is undergoing secret, advanced imaging procedures that he claims he doesn't remember, we have to ask the question, who is actually running the country? If he is mentally or physically incapacitated to the point where he cannot track his own medical care, is he tracking the economy? Is he tracking our foreign policy? Or are we living through a weekend at Bernie's presidency where unelected advisors, donors, and family members are pulling the strings behind the scenes while the figurehead is shuttled from Walter Reed to Mar-a-Lago? This is the nightmare scenario that the Constitution was supposed to prevent. We have the 25th Amendment. We have Section 4, which allows the Vice President and the Cabinet to step in if the President is unable to discharge his duties. But here is the reality check. The 25th Amendment is dead. It has been rendered obsolete by the corruption of the Republican Party. Do you think J.D. Vance is going to gather the cabinet and vote to remove Donald Trump? Do you think the loyalists he has installed in every single agency, people chosen not for their competence but for their fealty, are going to sign a letter declaring him unfit? Of course not. They are riding his coattails. Their power depends on his illusion of strength. They will prop him up, they will hide his condition, and they will lie to your face until the very bitter end. The safety valve has been welded shut. And that is why this perfect MRI lie is so dangerous. It is an attempt to normalize the idea that the president is above biology. It is the logic of a dictatorship. In North Korea, the leader never gets sick. In Russia, the leader never gets sick. And now in America, we are told the leader has perfect results from mysterious tests he can't recall taking. If we accept this, if the press corps just shrugs and moves on, we are establishing a precedent that will destroy the concept of presidential accountability forever. We are saying that the president's health is a state secret. We are saying that the American people have no right to know if the person with the nuclear codes is medically capable of using them. Make no mistake, the silence is the scandal. Every day that the White House refuses to release the specific diagnostic code for that MRI is a day they are betting against American democracy. They are betting that you are too tired to care. They are betting that the flood of noise will drown out the signal. But we cannot let that happen.
We need to demand the release of the records, not a summary written by a press secretary, not a letter dictated by the patient, the actual raw medical records. If the results were perfect, release them. If there is nothing to hide, show us. Because right now, the only thing that is perfect is the clarity of the cover-up. They are hiding the truth because the truth is devastating. And if we don't demand it now, we might not find out what was really going on until it is far, far too late. Don't let them gaslight you. Don't let them spin this. The president went to the hospital. He doesn't know why, and he refuses to tell us what they found. That isn't routine. That is a national emergency. I'm Ethan Cole. See you next time.